Speaking of amazing, Roger Stone is entering the studio. The great Roger Stone. Roger, welcome. Welcome back.
The well-dressed Roger Stone.
Very well-dressed Roger Stone. Have you ever not dressed properly for... Do you wake up in the morning ready for anything in terms of your dress? Because I could imagine that if you kind of stumble on, let's say you didn't plan on coming here and this was a last-minute thing and you weren't dressed for it, it could be very embarrassing for you.
Well, on the other hand, there's no prescribed outfit for a morning radio show. You guys look fine if you're not wearing suits.
No, but it's part of your brand.
If I don't show up wearing a suit, they say, maybe that wasn't really Roger Stone.
Right. Do you, when they make fun of your outfits, are you offended by that?
No, they're just people with no taste.
You find that to be true. Yeah, because I think I saw one, I think it was from one of the Alex Jones shows that you did, and you had like a black beret and black sunglasses on, and people were calling you a cat burglar and just going nuts on Twitter.
No, that was a homage to Bobby Seale and Huey Newton. I had a black leather jacket, a black turtleneck, black shades, and a black beret. It was also, I had to jump on the air quickly because I was doing a last-minute fill-in for somebody else.
That's what I'm talking about.
So I didn't have time to pull it together. But,
right.
Yeah, that was a homage. People just didn't get it.
They didn't.
And then
well,
at the inauguration, you know, I wore the traditional morning suit. If you go to the etiquette book, it tells you that for the inauguration of the president, this is the prescribed outfit.
And that was like a jacket with tails.
It's a swallowtail jacket with tails, a gray vest, a soft collar shirt, a striped tie, and so on. Every president until George Bush wore this outfit.
George H.W. Bush?
George H.W. Bush. He breaks the trend. So Reagan, Carter, you know, so on. Roosevelt, Truman.
And you were trying to bring it back.
I was trying, but it was obviously a one-man effort.
Unsuccessful.
Yeah, and then you're supposed to wear a white tie, tail and white tie to the inaugural balls. That didn't work either. Men were wearing what they call tuxedos, dinner jackets.
Right.
Completely inappropriate, but it beats, a T-shirt.
You wore what you were supposed to wear, though.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Now, is there
by the book?
Is there an actual book?
Well, there are, but the few books that have been written on this are mostly badly out of date. I have a book coming at the end of November called Stone's Rules of Style.
Oh.
That kind of tells the young man everything he needs to know about buying, taking care of, and showcasing, you know, the proper attire.
That's good. I think a lot of people could use that. A lot of people walking around here looking like slobs these days.
Well, the key to it is just always be dressed appropriately for the activity that you're about to undertake. In other words, if you're going bowling, don't wear a suit. If you're going to the grocery store, don't wear workout clothing.
But you end up showing up in places sometimes overly. Would you rather overdo it or underdo it?
Just remember Stone's rules.
Yeah, tell me.
You can never be overdressed. You can only be underdressed.
I see. So that's safe then. I understand. Now, today's a big day for you.
Well, maybe we'll see.
Today is the day, theoretically, that all these, whatever it is, 30,000 JFK-related documents are supposed to be released. You know, the law was passed 25 years ago today by Bush, right? That
signed by Bush,
yes.
I think reluctantly. See, the JFK movie by Oliver Stone caused a great public interest to return to the assassination. It was on the as a reaction to that the Congress passed the 1992 Jfk Records Release Act. And the first tranche of documents that they, thank you very much, that they released was very interesting. We found out a lot of things that we didn't know.
What was the stuff in that first
Well, for
tranche?
example, we have a memo from J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI, to President Lyndon Johnson that says, Mr. President, we have learned that the KGB has conducted their own independent investigation into John Kennedy's murder, and they have concluded, Mr. President, that you were the ringleader. We have a letter from French intelligence to Jacqueline Kennedy. It was a response, obviously, to a request from her. They said that they have done their own investigation. They've published it as a book called Farewell to Arms, and they concluded that Lyndon Johnson was the ringleader. There's a memo from J. Edgar Hoover to the head of the FBI in Dallas instructing him to brief George Bush of the CIA about the activities of anti-Castro Cubans in the Dallas area. The problem with that was George Bush said under oath he wasn't working for the CIA in 1963. So a bunch of little interesting things.
Right. Just all it really does is raise more questions, right? Because it's not proof. Because you could sit there and say, like, well, the KGB had a reason to say that Lyndon B. Johnson was the ringleader because they would want America to lose faith in their elected leaders, right?
In a sense, I mean, we didn't know this at the time, but Nikita Khrushchev took John and Bobby Kennedy the cleaners in the Cuban Missile Crisis. The story you've been told that they faced down the Russians and
right.
Castro back to
I saw the movie.
Total BS.
What?
We removed our missiles from Turkey and Italy in a secret deal that was classified for 40 years. So the military knew it at the time, but the American people didn't know it. Khrushchev had just taken Kennedy to the cleaners on the missile crisis, and he considered him a young, callow guy that he could bully. There was no reason for the Russians at that point to get rid of John Kennedy.
Mm-hmm. Now, what do you? But there would be a reason for the Russians to simply come out. I'm not saying that the Russians were responsible. There would be a reason for the Russians to just come out with a report that made it so that people questioned American leadership,
but
right?
It wasn't a public report. This was a.
I see. Okay.
This was an intelligence document. Now, there's an effort to pin this on the Russians and the Cubans. Mm-hmm. Johnson says it several times, but I think he has a motive in that. We also know that Fidel Castro had reached out to Kennedy through a back channel French journalist and said, maybe we should sit down. Maybe we should see if we could normalize relations. That was in the works at the time Kennedy was killed. Again, unlikely that Castro, therefore, is involved in the killing. Castro was reportedly surprised, but the diplomat who passed the message, there were two. There was a French journalist and an American diplomat. Both said Castro was amenable to a sit-down with JFK.
And the Americans at the time that weren't JFK did not want peace with Cuba.
The military-industrial complex, the deep state, the American war machine, they wanted an invasion of Cuba.
I see.
And they may have wanted World War III with the Russians. They were very belligerent. Good God, we've got to get rid of Jack Kennedy. He's for peace.
As we talk here, at about 9:35 Eastern Time, on the day that these documents are supposed to be released, what are the odds that we're going to see them? Are they pretty good?
Oh, I think we're going to see documents. The odds, however, are overwhelming that the National Archive will do what they did in July when they put out a small batch of documents, I think as a test. So much of it was redacted and censored and held back that it's meaningless.
So you don't think any questions will be answered?
Well, I put it this way. I think the Central Intelligence Agency bureaucrats have got to figure out a medium course here because the president wants disclosure. If they hand him 3,100 pages, which are incomprehensible, he's smart enough to say, you're countermanding my orders. This is, in essence, nullifying what I decided.
Right.
Show me what's covered here. I want to see if it's really in the interest of national security. Everybody involved has been dead for 50 years.
So that's Trump's part in this. Because some people are saying that Trump is getting too much credit for this because, it's the law. It was going to be exposed regardless of who the president is.
Here's how the law reads.
Yes.
The release was scheduled for October 26th, unless the president decides to delay it. He alone has the authority to knock it back for another 25 years, which he could have done. Barack Obama prevented the release of some of the Bay of Pigs documents on the basis of national security. People were scratching their heads. This was over 50 years ago. What could possibly be the big secret?
Well, that's the question, right? That is there a feasible explanation in your head as a skeptical person?
Yes.
That there would be a national security risk to putting these documents out, aside from this is a truth that we don't want the American people to know.
Here is the reason that I think they want to redact and censor the material. In 1963, the CIA was doing the same thing they do today, lying, covering up, and going out and trying to foment trouble around the globe. You've seen the intelligence agencies leak illegally about President Trump. I mean, he has a phone conversation with a foreign leader. He turns around and reads it on page 1 of the Washington Post. So I think it's their methods and their track record that they don't want people to focus on. These are the people who told us Saddam Hussein definitely has weapons of mass destruction. There's no torture going on at Abu Ghraib prison. I mean, this list goes on and on and on.
So this is not even necessarily because we don't want them to know that this was an inside whatever. This is a matter of just we don't want them to stop trusting the CIA.
Right, exactly. So it's not that we're going to learn anything specific. I suspect that the Kennedy assassination will be a murder mystery in which people will always be fascinated. And I'm not sure that we're ever going to reach a national consensus. But it's interesting to me that with the mainstream media propping up the whole Warren Commission, Oswald did it narrative for over 50 years, 74% of the American people in a poll say they don't believe it.
Right.
They don't think he did it, and they don't think he acted alone.
Well, it's a tough one. I mean, and I argue Troy is a big conspiracy guy, and he digs into these things, and I argue a lot of them. But the JFK one is one where it becomes really difficult at a certain point to just believe, even if you don't want to dive all the way in. It becomes pretty difficult to just believe it was as cut and dry.
Here's an example. We know from the FBI reports that came originally from the Dallas police that a man went to all the air charter services in Love Field, the airport, and inquired about renting a plane to go to Mexico on the 22nd. In every case, the man said his name was Lee Harvey Oswald. But then when the employees of the charter services are shown a picture of Oswald, every single one of them says, no, that's not the guy.
All of them said no,
That's
not just a
the
couple
guy.
of them.
Okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
A second man means a conspiracy. You have two people. Now it's a conspiracy.
Right.
Couldn't have acted alone if a Confederate was going around purposely, leaving fingerprints everywhere by asking for air charter.
Yeah, yeah.
A getaway plane, presumably.
Yeah. What is the do you think that one of the reasons that they want to delay this as far as possible is because the Bush family is involved and they're still kind of, even though they're still active?
I have a feeling that we have gotten whatever regarded George Bush we have learned already. Recognize that George H.W. Bush maintained for 30 years that he just couldn't remember where he was that day. Just couldn't remember. Which is not believable because every American who's an adult or cognizant knows where they were when Kennedy was killed. I know I was in the first grade. I can remember it vividly.
For my generation, it would be like forgetting where you were when the towers were attacked,
Right.
Correct?
So what the first tranche of documents from the National Archive showed us is that he was in Dallas that day, and that within 3 minutes of Kennedy being shot, he puts a call into the head of the FBI in Houston, essentially to create an alibi. Hi, this is George Bush. I'm here in Dallas, and actually he was in Tyler, Texas by then, because he had a lunch speech outside of Dallas. He says 3 times, "I'm in Tyler, Texas." He's clearly just trying to create an alibi for the record.
Gotcha. So he's sitting there and he won't stop saying, "I'm in
Right.
Tyler, Texas."
Right.
So hey, it says right there where I am.
It's convoluted. He calls and says, "This is George Bush. I'm in Tyler, Texas. I thought you should know that somebody told somebody who told me there's a young man named James Parrott who's a young Republican in Harris County, Houston, and he may or may not have made threats against the president. By the way, did I mention that I'm in Tyler, Texas?" So the FBI go roaring to this guy's house, James Parrott. They find him in the backyard painting Bush for the U.S. Senate signs. And the guy's bewildered. He has no idea what they're talking about. So I think it was an excuse to log the call and have an alibi.
At what point, because you've been close to government for a long time and close to politics for a long time, at what point did you really start to dig into this and really start to develop your own theories where you believe that certain things happen that are not being discussed?
As early as 1964, I read this book called A Texan Looks at Lyndon, and I found out what a crude, evil, corrupt, unbalanced psychopath Lyndon Baines Johnson was. The Kennedy murder is not his first murder. I wrote a book on this, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ. I tracked him to 15 murders prior, murders to cover up corruption, murders to cover up voter theft. It was a staple in Texas politics from the 30s to the 50s.
This sounds like what House of Cards is based on.
Yeah, no, it's very true. So the agricultural agent who's looking into the Lyndon Johnson, Billy Sal Estes scandal, major scandal where Johnson's taking kickbacks from this Texas wheeler dealer, Henry Marshall. He is found dead on his farm. He shot himself in the head 5 times with a bolt action rifle, and the coroner called it suicide. Well, that's not physically possible.
5 times?
5 times.
Yeah, you'd think after 2, maybe.
I don't think you can get two off.
Yeah, probably just the single one. Do you... the thing about when you get into conspiracy, though, that I think damages it is, do you get to a point where does it anger you when you read conspiracy theories, when people, even like Alex Jones, will come out with stuff that is not accurate? And it kind of hurts credibility, and I talk to Troy about this all the time, when you have people who are like, okay, I can buy this, nah, that I don't buy. And then you start to double back on the beginning stuff, like, you know what? Let me just write off the source.
I think it's healthy to be skeptical. The government
of all sides.
The government rarely tells you the truth. So
Okay.
I think you have to approach these things with an open mind. You want to hear a conspiracy? I'll tell you a conspiracy theory.
Tell me.
Lee Harvey Oswald killed Kennedy, acted alone. There's a conspiracy theory. Donald Trump colluded with the Russians to win the election. There's a conspiracy theory. The mainstream media pushes conspiracy theories all the time.
Do you love the way this Russia thing is panning out at the moment?
Boy, it sure is boomerang, isn't it?
It really is not great.
I mean, all of my Democratic friends
Yeah.
say to me, why won't Hillary just go away? She needs to just go away. She's made millions. She's got plenty of money. Why won't she just shut up? No, I think she's been particularly disgraceful the last 48 hours. Her crap's just not selling anymore. She needs to give it up.
Yeah, I don't know what the motivation is. I don't know if there's just a desire to save face. I don't think that she wants to run for election again in 4 years.
I would be surprised. She barely limped through this one.
Right. Yeah, I don't know what the motivation is to stay in front of the camera.
Well, you can have,
at all.
You can have power without being elected to it. In other words, I think she has a very healthy ego and a very high regard for herself, which is interesting given her track record. And she just can't give up the spotlight. I really think that's it.
When you get brought into hearings about Russia and about your ties with WikiLeaks and giving up names and all that stuff, does that terrify you? Is it a scary thing when you, as an individual, get brought into hearings?
Not really, because you see, you don't have to memorize anything. Just tell the truth.
Right.
It's really simple. Now, I would compare it as an experience to something like, I don't know, like a proctological exam. Right. It's not fun, but all you have to do is tell the truth, and that's what I did. I have no vulnerability. I didn't collude with any Russians. I didn't meet with any Russians. I didn't talk with any Russians. I didn't conspire with any Russians. I didn't coordinate with any Russians. I don't eat Russian dressing on my salads, and I've stopped drinking Russian vodka. So, I mean, there's just nothing there.
You talked to no Russians?
None.
During the election at all?
None.
And did you have to give up I was reading somewhere, did you have to give up the name of the person who was connecting you with WikiLeaks?
Yeah, it was a little more innocuous than that.
Yeah.
On the 21st of June, Julian Assange gives a speech, which is widely covered, and he says, I've got Hillary's emails, and I'm going to release them. So I asked a friend of mine, who's a reporter, a journalist, can you get a confirmation on that before I, spread it far and wide? I want to make sure this guy's on the up and up. 2 weeks later, he calls me back and says, yeah, I checked it out. He's definitely got the stuff. That's it. I was hesitant to give up that individual's name because I didn't want reprisals against them in their job. So ultimately, I got the privilege waived, and I was able to disclose it. The committee has kept it confidential. I just don't want some guy to lose his job because he was doing what journalists do.
And also as a matter of principle, right?
Correct.
Like as just maintaining the integrity of journalism.
The record, the conversation was off the record. You can say, as some have, Stone, you're not a journalist. Really? I do a column every day a week. I have a 1-hour net-based television show on InfoWars 1 day a week. You do this. You know how that it's not like you jump on and it goes like that.
Right.
It's a job. So I've written 5 books. I've written a New York Times bestseller. I have a daily radio and television show and a daily column. Yeah, I'm an opinion journalist.
You consider yourself a journalist?
An opinion journalist.
Right.
I'm not a news reporter.
Right.
I never claimed to be, but I'm an opinion journalist.
Right. Now, what does that mean?
Well, I make no bones about
because I know a personality. Like I would probably consider you a personality if I were to be asked.
Well, but I guess my point is everything I'm writing is coming from a certain point of view. I'm not claiming that I'm not biased.
Gotcha.
This isn't news coverage, unbiased news coverage. It's opinion journalism.
But your credibility is not to be brought into question. That's where the journalism...
You still have the same rules.
Right.
If somebody tells you something that's off the record and you agree to honor that, you have to live by that rule. If somebody tells you that something's on background, you have to live by that rule. If you don't, people stop talking to you. You begin to lose information.
It becomes very difficult at that point to do your job, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Right. And then the information just kind of disappears.
Yep.
It just goes away. So what is the story now? Were the Democrats working with Russia to try to make it look like the Republicans were working with Russia? I get lost so quickly with these conversations.
It's actually not that complicated.
Explain it to me.
There was a presidential candidate in bed with the Russians. Unfortunately, it was Hilary Clinton. There's the uranium deal. There's the banking deal. There's the Gazprom gas deal. John and Tony Podesta, her top guys, are literally making millions of dollars in fees from oligarchs that are close to Putin and tight with the Kremlin. So I've got to say that the maneuver by Podesta is brilliant. Look over there. Donald Trump, he's in bed with the Russians. So it's distraction. It's an attempt to distract.
So is that what it is? That, like, you can't accuse us of this because I'm accusing you of it. And even if you do accuse us of it, it's going to just sound like you're...
9 of the board members of the Russian company that acquired the uranium rights gave $145 million to the Clinton Foundation before the deal went down. They gave $500,000 to Bill personally in a speaking fee. So, I mean, those are thinly described bribes is exactly what they are.
What about the emails that came out of Don Jr. Trying to get to meetings with the Russians? They said, hey, this Russian guy knows this. Hey, I want to talk to him, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, not illegal or improper. You're in the middle of a presidential campaign. Somebody you know, remember this came to him through a guy that he'd worked with, says, this woman has evidence of malfeasance by Hillary Clinton. If you didn't look into that, that would be irresponsible. Now, in the end, there was nothing there. It afforded nothing. And the more you look at it, you find that the Russian woman lawyer who met with Donald Jr. had no visa to get in the country, but the FBI let her in. That smells like a setup to me.
I see. We got a couple people on the line that want to ask you questions about the JFK stuff. If you want to put your headphones on so you can hear, and you want to make sure his volume's good. Mike in Pennsylvania. Welcome, Jim Norton and Sam Roberts. Roger Stone is here.
Hey, thank you, guys. Mr. Stone, it's
Yes.
an honor to speak with you.
Thank you.
I loved your last book. Few things. I personally supported Trump financially, went to his rallies. I got a personal invitation to his inauguration.
Oh, my God.
Best thing that ever happened for America. Couple things.
Hang on. Would you agree with that, Roger Stone? Do you not think that there are a lot of flaws with the way Donald Trump has conducted himself as president, and it's kind of a stretch to say that he's the best thing that's ever happened to America?
No.
I get you, Mike, but I want to hear what Roger says.
Image of him.
Well, the two-party duopoly that's been running the country for the last 30 years, how are they doing?
Right.
They give you endless war, erosion of your civil liberties, massive debt and spending and borrowing. Their big trade deals that were supposed to solve everything, all they did was take all the jobs out of the country. The immigration policies leave the parts of the country unsafe, neighborhoods and streets unsafe. So why not try something different? The Bushes and the Clintons, the Republicans and the Democrats working together have failed. They've run the country into the ditch. That's why, as improbable as Trump's election was, people wanted something radically different.
Totally. And I'm not confused by it at all. I get it. But aren't there moments now where you wish you would shut the fuck up, where you're like, you did not phrase that well, where, for instance, you'd be like, can't you just jump on TV and say some bad things about some Nazis and move on from this?
You know, the problem is that you're looking at it in real time, and it's easy to say, he could have done this better, he could have done that better. We won't know until, the fourth year of his presidency whether he's been successful or not.
And you believe he will be?
I think there's a high probability if he will stick to his guns with a reform agenda and make a few major changes in the country, he could be a very successful president. If that's true, then everybody will look back at these idiosyncrasies like his tweeting and say, how brilliant that was. It's all about whether you're successful or not.
I see.
I mean, they used to say, Mario Cuomo, God, he talks over everybody's head. He's so cerebral. He can't connect with the honest man. Then when he wins, what a genius that Mario Cuomo is.
Right. Okay, Mike, go ahead.
All right. One thing about the government, like Trump is a businessman. He's going to run it like a business. There shouldn't be two parties opposing each other when we're all Americans. Just like a board at a corporation, it should be run for the profit and the best thing of the stockholders. That's one thing that's wrong with the government. But anyway.
The problem with that, of course, is that it is run by one party. They just pretend otherwise.
They pretend it's two parties.
Look, the country's in such bad shape. No one party could have done this by themselves. They had help. Exactly. Republicans and Democrats, I say this in sadness because I'm a lifelong Republican, but they're equally responsible for where we are today.
Do you think that President Trump needs to do more to make people who feel now like they're isolated by this guy who's, this kind of obnoxious, abrupt dude, that feel isolated, that feel that they're not being represented? Do you think he needs to do more to bring people together? Because I do think that Donald likes rivalry, that Donald likes competition, that he likes that there's extremes on either side. That you're
he also likes to be liked. He wants to be popular.
And I'm just, you know him. I'm watching him on television, but I feel like he is happier with an extreme group of people that really like him, like the Mikes of the world, that are like he's the greatest of all time, than hitting that. Hang on, Mike. Than hitting that middle of the road and saying, you know what, he's pretty good. I think he'd rather have a smaller group saying he's great than a bigger group saying, okay, he's acceptable.
First of all,
but the bigger group is the ones that put him in the office.
No, I got it, but I'm not talking about winning an election. I'm just talking about the country.
I think a larger problem, in all candor, is that he gets elected with this mandate, and then he systematically, trusting the Republican Party, appoints a bunch of establishment types who didn't vote for him, didn't endorse him, don't support his policies. Then when they go out and publicly disagree with him, he's disappointed. I mean, the Secretary of State or the president's chief economic advisor, Gary Cohn, if you disagree with something the president says, tell him.
Right.
Bring it up internally. Don't go public with it. That's disloyal. It's inappropriate. It's unprofessional. When Walter Hickel was the Secretary of Interior, he criticized Nixon on something pertaining to the Vietnam War, fired in 15 minutes. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Scaramucci was a mistake, wasn't he?
Well, he was a suicide bomber. He may have blown himself up, but he took two of them with him. So to me, he's a hero.
That's actually a great perspective.
Yeah, he's a political suicide bomber.
And what did you think of Steve Bannon?
I like Steve Bannon. I think he's much more effective in the role he's in now, outside the tent, tossing the hand grenades in instead of inside the tent, trying to toss them out.
I see.
He's right about the status quo nature of the Republican Party and a number of these senators who just like things the way they are.
Mike, sorry, buddy. I'm going to let you go because we've only got a couple minutes left with Roger Stone, which you can get to his website at stonecoldtruth.com, and you can tweet him at Roger Stone Jr. But Troy over here has been very, very excited about you coming in all week. He's been saying, when's Roger coming back? When's Roger coming back?
That's very nice.
And he has a couple questions.
Roger, I appreciate you coming in, man. And please, if you can come back sometime, because I could talk to you for hours.
I'd like to come back.
I have so many questions for you, but I only have a couple of minutes. What do you think JFK's involvement was with wanting to know what the Majestic 12 was about and wanting to expose UFOs and extraterrestrials?
This question comes up all the time when I speak. I'll be honest with you, I don't know anything about it. There are a group of people who believe that one of the reasons he was killed is because he was about to go public and expose the existence of life on other planets and interplanetary travel. I've never been able to find any documentation of it, but there's a group of people out there that fervently believe it.
Do you believe there's a UFO cover-up?
I have no idea.
You don't know. You would believe it, but you have not seen any evidence of it.
Well, it's obviously scientifically possible.
Sure.
I have just never seen any, so I couldn't say.
Sure.
And what's your thoughts on the Las Vegas shooting?
It's not all adding up. It's just not all adding up. There's just too many unanswered questions. And the difference, I think, between now and 1963, which is a healthy thing, is in 1963 you had 3 television networks. There was only one guy there with a camera, Zapruder, and his film was seized and sent to Rochester where they altered it. Today, you've got all these people with cell cameras. You've got all these citizen journalists. We're turning up all kinds of valuable information, clues, as it were, to what happened. There'll never be a point where CBS will say, this guy acted alone, he did it, he was just nuts, and everybody will accept that.
Yeah, do you? It's much more difficult now in 2017 to cover up something than it was.
Almost impossible because of the internet and because of the. First of all, if you have an alternative view, you can hook up with other people who agree with you.
Right.
In 1963, if it didn't happen on ABC, NBC, and CBS, it just didn't happen.
Yeah. Whereas now you can literally go in your basement and start a TV station.
They had a monopoly on political discourse for many years, and that's why they're so arrogant today, because they don't like the fact that there's a robust, vibrant alternative media. If you don't like the big three and the two big cable networks, you can go someplace else.
Yeah, yeah. Let me go.
Sorry to interrupt.
I didn't mean to hit that, but it was appropriate. Let's go to Mike in Philly. What's up, Mike?
Hey, Sam, big fan. Mr. Stone, I'm a huge fan. I wanted to ask you, in terms of the JFK conspiracy, what do you think the level of involvement was with the mafia? Because we know that the mafia got JFK elected. We know that they had, at that time, they were at the height of their power. They controlled entire industries and cities.
Yep.
I've read that there's wiretaps, an inmate with Carlos Marcello, the boss of Louisiana, who was connected to Oswald and Jack Ruby.
Yes.
Admitted in prison that he had JFK killed.
Yes.
Santo Trafficante. I'm not saying that they had the power to kill a president. But
everything you say is
CIA.
correct. Everything here you say is correct. The theme of my book is that you had a number of powerful entities in the country that Jack and Bobby Kennedy had crossed. As I said earlier, the intelligence agencies are upset about the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis. The mob is upset because Ambassador Joe Kennedy, Jack Kennedy's father, got $1 million from Sam Giancana, which is huge money in 1960, the Chicago mob, and the mob was breaking knees on Election Day for Jack Kennedy in Illinois and West Virginia and Texas. And the deal was that Kennedy's Justice Department would back off ongoing efforts under Eisenhower to deport Carlos Marcello and Santo Trafficante, two of the biggest crime family leaders. Well, Jack Kennedy got elected. Bobby became Attorney General, and he goes after these two guys with everything he's got. They were double-crossed. So they clearly play a role. The Central Intelligence Agency's motive we've covered. Big Texas Oil, they're upset because JFK is trying to repeal their tax breaks, the oil depletion allowance. That's why they finance it. And then there's good old LBJ. He knows that there are two criminal investigations about to come down on him, the Bobby Baker case and the Billy Sal Estes case, and he's going not just to be dropped from the ticket, he's going to prison. He knows that Drew Pearson, who's the most influential columnist of his time, has a column in the can for Sunday, November 23rd, that says LBJ took a $10,000 bribe to fix a procurement contract for General Dynamics in the TXF fighter. That column gets spiked when John Kennedy is killed because they're not going to take on the new president. Johnson knows the clock is running out. Bobby wants to put him in jail. He's got to move first, and he does. Who controls the Dallas police? Who controls the Dallas Sheriff's Office? Who controls, most importantly, the Dallas District Attorney? Because murder in 1963 in Texas is a state, not federal crime, which means good old LBJ controls the investigation from the get-go.
Why do you hear people saying, like, oh, I would expose the truth, but I'm in danger of being attacked or my family being killed or whatever? You hear that stuff all the time from people who say they have the truth.
But an extraordinary number of people defying the mathematical odds who are connected to the Kennedy assassination have been killed.
So how come you're safe?
Maybe because you're so high profile
I
that
see.
you say, if something happens to me, you'll know Hilary Clinton did it.
Right.
Or whatever.
Right, yeah. I would say if something happened to Roger Stone, we would be made aware of it.
Yeah.
We would be made aware of it.
And Fine Podesta, he did it. So.